So thanks for coming tonight. I know there's a lot of things going on tonight in Ashland, and you guys chose to focus on your digestion for some reason. And that's really the most important thing anyway when you think about your health. So thanks. So let me tell you, for some of you know who I am, and some of you may not, or at least I don't recognize you. I'll tell you a little bit about my background and how I got into this field of nutrition. And then we'll get into the class, and there'll be time for questions. If you have an important question on a topic I'm talking about, you can raise your hand. I want this to be for you guys. It's not just me dispensing information. It's really me trying to answer your questions or help you understand things that are important to you. So I got involved in natural healing as a result of my own health challenges. And actually, for the topic for tonight, the digestive system, it really, for me, it started as a child. I mean, I was very sick as a child. I had a very poor digestive tract. I had malabsorption syndrome. For a while, doctors thought, my mother thought I had celiac disease, potentially. So I was very weak. I had lots of bowel problems. I was very colicky. And of course, I don't remember this. It's all based on what my mother told me, but I have it somewhere stored back in my consciousness that digestion is very important. And basically I got well that first time as a child by my mother discovering that I was allergic to milk and gluten grains. I believe those were the two major things. Okay, so so I got my health better as a little boy, and I was a pretty healthy little kid. But as I grew up, I had some other health challenges that led me to have my health collapse again in my 20s, and there I had, again, horrible digestion problems, just constipation I could not eliminate without a colonic. I had candida overgrowth, constant bowel problems. I remember in college, everywhere I rode my bike, I would have a bottle of Maalox in my backpack. I always had stomach problems. So, I mean, so this was something I didn't understand what to do at that point, obviously. And then gradually I came across natural healers who were able to help me understand what was going on in my case, which was a combination of factors, including heavy metal toxicity, a very poor diet, emotional stresses, the common things that we've all seen combined together to cause health problems. Candida overgrowth, yeast overgrowth, parasites, all those things. So when I got my health better again in my 20s, I made a change in my career, which was, at the time I was a lawyer, and I gradually phased out law and studied nutrition. So I studied nutrition in a sort of unorthodox way. I basically came across people who knew a lot about nutrition and health. Healthcare practitioners, sort of independent researchers, and I apprenticed with them. I studied with them. I studied live blood cell microscopy. Some of you have seen me. Linda's seen me, and a few people have seen me for live blood cell testing. And they know that what I do is I look at blood with a microscope, and you can see the red cells and the white cells and the stuff in the blood, including signs of poor digestion. So that's one of the ways I've started to assess digestion in my practice. So after I got my practice started, I started working in medical clinics in Chicago. I worked at the largest holistic clinic in the Midwest, the Optimal Wellness Center, which was the clinic of Dr. Mercola. You may have heard of him, and we had a very big practice, and we saw lots of patients. I mean, hundreds of patients a week were pouring through there, and a lot of them had gastrointestinal problems, obviously. That's probably the #1 complaint. That and fatigue and hormone imbalance. I mean, those are the 3 top things. So we had a lot of experience with GI problems, from little kids all the way to elderly people. It was universal. Now, there's an epidemic of gastrointestinal problems. I don't know if any of you have particular issues. Some people nodding. Okay, so we're all in this together. We're here to explore how the digestive system works and to understand it, and then also talk about specific conditions. What are the causes of those conditions? What are some things that have been seen to work for those conditions? I want to talk a lot about my experience. I try to keep things less theoretical and more pragmatic, like what have I actually seen work with these problems? Because that's what people come to me for, is results, not theories about things. So we got to talk about what actually is experienced. I mean, my own personal experience, I know how I healed my, and improved my digestive system. And I've seen lots of people get the same benefits. So, any questions so far?
What's
It's an antacid. Yeah. I want to make sure everybody has all the handouts, because the handouts are, I printed these up because I want you guys to, when you leave today, you have something. There's over here. I want you to leave with something to take home and to be able to study and reflect on, and you can take notes, of course. And like I said, we'll have a DVD available in a week or so for those who want to purchase that. So let's make sure you have everything. We have the digestive system disorders, causes, and remedies. This is the basic, these are the most common digestive system problems that I come across, and basic underlying causes and remedies. The parasite candida questionnaire, which you guys can fill out now or later, and if you want me to go over it with you, I'll be happy to do that. So that's basically, it's a set of questions that have, the way you answer will have a correlation to whether you have a likelihood of candida and or parasite overgrowth in the intestinal tract. The resource guide for getting to the digestion elimination lecture tonight, which is, I think is very helpful. Basically, some excellent books. So what I like to have people do is to be, I mean, my whole thing is I got into this field for myself to learn, to get well. So I'm usually attracting people who are proactive. They want to learn things. They don't want to just come to me and say, fix my problem. So I think it's really important to build at least a mini library on health. Like the most important books to understand how your health works, how your body works, and to learn this. I mean, this is part of the reason we're in the problem we are in America with health, is that people have not taken action to study for themselves. They're going to doctors or nutritionists or naturopaths, and they're staying disempowered. They're not actually studying on their own, because if I'm standing here today talking about digestive function, it's a miracle, because I had no background in medicine or biology or any of this stuff. I was a lawyer, and I just decided to apply my knowledge to understand how things worked, and started getting better results with that. So these books here are the top books, and a couple of really incredible websites on digestion, enzymes, and probiotics. Those are the three major things that are covered here. Then I have some products that I recommend, some that you can find in a health food store, some that are gotten through practitioners, and then a couple of practitioners listed there, colon hydrotherapist and myself, okay, for those who want to contact me.
She has done great, and Helen's taking her place.
Okay.
I can't remember Helen's last name.
So there's one of the people listed on the resource guide is on a sabbatical, but they have a person taking over. So that same number, you could probably reach that person at for colonics. Then also we have the top 10 tips for healthy digestive function. If all you get out of tonight's class are these 10 things and you follow them religiously, you'll be in great shape, okay? It's a question is, can you follow these things religiously? It's even number one is hard to do for most people. To eat consciously, to have gratitude for your food, to relax when you're eating, to not be stressed out, to not focus on, you know, the news or the newspaper, or just to focus on food itself. So that's the number one thing for digestion, is what's known as conscious eating. Okay, so that's the 10 healthy tips. And then the last handout is the overview of the entire 6-part lecture series I'm doing. So this is part 1. I want to start with digestion, because from my view, it really is the most important thing, is digestion. It starts in the digestive tract. I healed myself from chronic fatigue syndrome and many other complicated problems, basically just by cleaning out my intestinal tract. You may have heard of Dr. Richard Schultz, any of you? Dr. Richard Schultz. He's a master herbalist who has a company that sells herbs. And he studied herbs because he wanted to heal people from all kinds of diseases. And he says that once he cleaned out people's intestines, 90% of the problems were gone, right? So it really comes down to, when you think about it, your digestive tract is where you process nutrients, and where a lot of toxins get, if you're not eliminated, get reabsorbed back into the body. So that's pretty much, those are the 1-2, you know, of health problems: toxicity and lack of nutrients. So from my perspective, what I've always taught my clients and students, and practice myself to the best of my ability, is that if you go to underlying causation, what are the causes of your health problem, not just the symptoms, but why are these things showing up, you'll have better results than if you just treat symptoms. So causes are always going to be the 3 causes, right? Linda and Rita, you guys know this. You've come to all my talks. Toxins, nutrient deficiencies, and emotional trauma and stress. Now, I've added a 4th cause. You know, this is a miraculous discovery of mine, right? A 4th cause, which I wrote in my last newsletter. It's parasite and fungal infections, which really are in some ways a result of the toxicities primarily. But because it's so prevalent, I decided to add it as a 4th cause. Because it is, if you don't address the parasite fungal overgrowth in the body and it's overriding your body, and you're trying to nourish your body and detoxify heavy metals, you may not be able to do it efficiently because your body's just too worn down, your immune system's too weak. So sometimes you have to go in with a parasite or candida cleanse, flush it out, and then go in for the other aspects of the program. Does that make sense? Okay. So in that light, that we're always talking about causation here. And so any health problem you have, whether it's gastrointestinal, attention deficit disorder, heart disease, cancer, overweight, whatever it is, emotions, toxins, nutrient deficiencies, always, and infections, you can say now. Now, there are other things. Some people would say, what about genetics? Well, genetics we have no control over, so it's not on the agenda to address, is it? You can say, well, you have a genetic predisposition. You know, you're short, but if you train hard, you could be a good basketball player. I mean, there's no reason that genetics have to override your willpower and your knowledge. So we have control over our knowledge, and we have control over willpower. So that's what we're applying to our health challenges: intelligence and willpower, using the causation paradigm to address our specific problems. And tonight we're talking about the gastrointestinal tract. So how does you know, so first of all, what digestion is basically, in essence, it's taking big things, food, and breaking them down into little things, nutrients. That's all it is. So the whole process is breaking down big things into little things, and even detoxification is breaking down big things into little things, breaking down big toxins into little things that you can excrete. So and I'm going to make this as simple as possible, because you really don't have to have much technical knowledge to apply this at all. It's very simple. Breaking down big things into little things, so you have, what are the major types of nutrients we have? Protein, fats, and carbohydrates, right? So those have to be broken down into amino acids, fatty acids, and glucose, right? That's what and then from that, that's what the macronutrients are broken down into. And in those macronutrients, we have vitamins and minerals. That's it, right? So as you liberate the proteins and fats and carbohydrates and break them down, you liberate the vitamins and minerals, which get absorbed in the intestinal tract too. Okay? So digestion starts in the mouth. This is, I know this is a masterpiece of a drawing of a human being, so I'm thinking of selling it, but that's my best effort at drawing. So this is the mouth. Here's the esophagus. So it starts in the mouth, so chewing. So chewing is, you know, your mother's told you to chew your food. You know, they may not know why, but it's why. Does anybody know why we chew our food? I mean, Daryl? Yeah. Yeah, there's a mechanical process. There's 2 basic processes in digestion: mechanical, which is chewing, and your stomach actually does some contracting, and chemical. Mechanical and chemical. If you don't masticate, now you could masticate with your mouth or you could blend it. That masticates it too. But the added advantage of chewing it is saliva is produced, right? And what's in the saliva? Enzymes. Amylase and lipase. Amylase digest what? Carbohydrates. Right. Lipase, fats. So if you don't chew your food, you start out with a disadvantage. Step 1 of the process, this multi-step process, is bypassed, and you have less efficient digestion. Remember, this takes place in stages. all proteins take multiple stages to break down. If you miss that one first stage of chewing the food, or let's say you have a blended drink, like a lot of us are doing blended drinks, you should swoosh it around in your mouth first, right? Because then that stimulates saliva. You don't have to chew it because it's been chewed up by the blender, but you should swoosh it around in your mouth. They say, drink your solids and chew your liquids, right? That's a famous saying from, Bernard Jensen or somebody, right? So yeah, so chewing is the beginning of digestion, and then also the smell of the food triggers hormone releases to your stomach to produce hydrochloric acid. So if you pay attention to, if you actually notice your food, visually, first of all, just seeing food can start digestion. Smelling food can start digestion. So just gobbling it down, you miss the nervous systems and the hormonal systems response to the senses that start the digestive process. So look at your food, smell your food if you don't normally. Some people really like food and they would naturally enjoy the smell. It's not just the taste, it's the smell. So hydrochloric acid, we'll get to that in a minute, where that comes in. That's critical for digestion of proteins. And guess what? Most people don't produce enough hydrochloric acid. So they don't digest proteins very well. So the mouth is the starting process, right? Down the mouth, the masticated food with saliva comes down the esophagus, which is like a pipe. And there's an esophageal sphincter right here that is a valve that lets the food, the masticated food into the stomach. So if that is not working properly, or if the stomach acids are backing up, you have GERD, esophageal reflux disease, right? Gastrointestinal esophageal reflux disease. So that's acid reflux. So that's where the burning comes up in the esophagus. So sometimes that little valve is malfunctioning, but often it's just a result, when I get into the conditions, often it's a result of just poor digestion and the food staying in the stomach too long and the acid's backing up. So it's not actually too much acid causing the acid reflux. It's poor digestion, often not enough acid. And then whatever acid you have in your gut backs up because the stomach isn't emptying fast enough, and it's backing up into the esophagus. Okay? So the pipe, food comes down. This is the liver's actually on the side here. It comes into the stomach, right? The stomach, the food stays in there about 1/2 to 2 hours. Now the stomach has a lining, a mucosal lining, that has cells in it. And those cells secrete hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid, what it does is it untwists the proteins. I don't know if you know about proteins, how they're formed. They actually are folded in on each other. Proteins are anywhere from 200 to 5,000 amino acids in a chain of proteins. So they're all like a double helix, the DNA, it's sort of twisted. So hydrochloric acid untwists or denatures those proteins. If you don't have enough hydrochloric acid, that twisted amino acid complex never gets untwisted. And you have incomplete digestion, which leads to acid reflux, fermentation in the bowels, parasites, all kinds of problems. So HCl, hydrochloric acid, is secreted from the intestinal lining of the mucous membranes of the intestines. And then pepsin is another acid enzyme that's produced in the stomach too, that actually pepsin then starts to hydrolyze or cut the amino acids. So you have these chains of amino acids, right, folded in each other, that are untwisted, and then they're cut by the pepsin. So you need both. And now's probably a good time to talk about this, come to think of it, because I think I want to sort of tie this all in. Why don't we have enough hydrochloric acid? Why are our bodies, most people are not producing it. They're not producing it. What is acid? Acid is like fire, right? It's like hot. It burns things, right? So what neutralizes fire? In just the regular world? Water. Just a fire, put some water on it, right? In this case, acid is neutralized by alkalinity, right? Minerals. Minerals, bicarbonate enzymes in the pancreas are secreted in the next stage of digestion, in the duodenum, that would neutralize the acid. What if you don't have enough minerals in your body? What if you're mineral deficient? What will your body do?
Produce less acid.
It will produce less acid because if you don't, you'll burn a hole in your stomach, right? So there's a complex, first of all, this topic is a lot more complex than I'm talking about tonight. And I'm going to make it as simple as I can. But there is, your body communicates through hormones, or like messengers, that send messages to produce things or stop producing things, right? So if you don't have enough minerals to produce enough bicarbonate enzymes in the pancreatic stage of digestion, there's going to be a hormone produced that says, don't secrete so much hydrochloric acid. Secretin, and then there's another one, I forget the name of it. But so there's a feedback system going on. If you're mineral deficient, you're going to produce less acid. So why do we get mineral deficient?
You don't eat enough vegetables.
Also, maybe, but maybe there's not enough minerals in the soil, or maybe we have so much acid we're exposed to that we're depleting our minerals. Like, minerals are like dollar bills. I mean, is $5,000 a lot of money? It depends on what your expenses are. You know, there's no objective. You need as much minerals to cope with the acids you got. What is our lifestyle now? Acid, sugar, coffee, stress, all acid producing, electromagnetic radiation, cell phones, computers. That's all ionizing, non-ionizing radiation. That's acid. Purely acid. We're in an acid soup, chemically. So no wonder we have mineral deficiencies, and no wonder we have hydrochloric acid deficiencies then. So again, so everything's connected. Then plus, if you don't have hydrochloric acid production good, it's not good, you will not liberate the minerals from the food properly anyway, and you'll get more deficiencies. So you can see how this is a feedback system, a negative feedback system. So to break that, what did people do? They did what I did, extreme measures, right? It's just, you know, the normal things didn't work. I needed more minerals, I drank huge amounts of vegetables, right? Lots of it. I needed hydrochloric acid, I took some herbs to stimulate hydrochloric acid production. I used other things. Let's say you don't have enough hydrochloric acid, but you can compensate for that by having a lot of good bacteria in your gut, which then will help digest the food. So there's multiple ways to digest food, but optimally we're talking about chew the food, stomach acid, pepsin, then the food gets released passes through the pyloric sphincter here into the duodenum, which is the top of the intestines. Can you see that, everybody? My writing is not too good. Duodenum. So stomach, and then duodenum right here. So duodenum is where the acid neutralization chamber is, basically. So you have all this acid chyme, it's called chyme at this point, all the mucky stuff that you've been trying to digest in the stomach, is then dropped down into the duodenum, and then you have to neutralize that acid. And the pancreas does that. Here's the pancreas, that you can see probably nicely, right? And that is, the pancreas is secreting the trypsin and chymotrypsin, basically, into the duodenum to neutralize all that acid from this earlier stage.
Is it all right to
Yeah.
interject something?
Yeah.
Have you read Victoria Buchenko's study, the green smoothie, and the resulting increase in hydrochloric acid in all of the participants who were in that study?
I have. Have I read Victoria Buchenko's study on how green smoothies help increase hydrochloric acid production? I haven't, but it makes perfect sense because it's full of minerals. So if your body has enough if you have enough water reserves, you can use fire, right? Because you can put it out. Your body is not going to burn a hole in its stomach. It's going to have some other backup system to digest. It doesn't mean you won't digest the food, but it'll be incomplete. So this is all relative. It's not like you either are digesting or you're not. It's all absolutely relative. So there's degrees of this, and you'll notice this. It's very clear. You'll know, I mean, I can tell you, I would eat foods and it would just sit there, no digestion. Sometimes I eat foods and it's perfectly digested within, like sushi, raw fish, I digest it like that. Why? Because it has enzymes in it. Raw foods have enzymes in them, whether it's vegetables or fish or whatever. Enzymes are types of proteins that hydrolyze or break or cut larger molecules. So raw food, whether it's animal foods or vegetation, if they're digestible, some raw foods you can't digest because the membrane, the cellulose fibers are too thick. Like, it's easier to steam them or to juice them. But most foods that are raw are easy to digest, raw or sprouted. So that's one of the things I'm a big advocate of because it cured me from all kinds of health problems is raw food.
One
Oh, yeah.
objection, and I would like to know what you've heard about this, because I only found this in one source, that the stomach is actually in two separate parts, and the first part is where the raw food, the enzymes, when you eat raw,
Yeah.
the enzymes in the raw food start pre-digesting it before it moves into the second part, and that if you eat cooked food and then raw food, it's not able to do that. Have you
I've read that. I don't know for sure, but here's what I say about raw food. I've read a lot of, it's more than research. I've experienced it more. So I've read things, done, whatever, forget reading. But my experience is raw foods have enzymes in them, they digest quicker. That's the bottom line. Some raw foods you couldn't digest. For some people can't digest it. They can't digest the fibers. So they have to break apart the fibers. So what happens with cooked food, when there's studies done on cooked food, when people eat cooked food, there's a phenomenon called digestive leukocytosis that takes place. Have any of you heard of that? Basically, a lot of white blood cells are produced and sent into the gut. So the question is, why would that be the case? And white blood cells are produced for an infection, right? But white blood cells have lots of enzymes in them. So what they do is the immune system starts to help digest the cooked food. So because that's so normal, doctors thought that was just normal because most people that were studied were eating cooked food. Then people ate raw food, they wouldn't see that phenomena. So what happens is, again, your body's intelligence is astounding because it will use all kinds of systems to support our indiscretions or misunderstandings to compensate. I mean, it's a miracle when I look at my clients and myself that we're still here. When I think of the things we've gone through, and I look at their blood, the things that are in it, it's incredible. Full of things that, pathogens, toxins, all kinds of problems. But and somehow we manage, we get through and we live a fraction of what we're supposed to live, but still we live, the normal mammals live till 10 times the age that they can reproduce. All mammals other than humans. So why is that? We should live till about 130 if we're like any other mammal in nature. And what is it that we do different other than kill each other and, with wars and stuff? But aside of that, we cooked food. Other animals don't. And I'm not standing here saying that everybody should eat raw food. I don't entirely. But I have, at times, I've eaten all raw vegan foods, and I've had all raw omnivore diets. And I can tell you my experience is overall good, but some imbalances are created, which can be modified. And some people do better with a certain percentage of cooked food and some raw. But basically, there's a lot of truth to the raw food approach. Any questions about so far this? So 1/2 to 2 hours in the stomach, okay? The intestines, the small intestines are here. I know this isn't a good diagram, but they wind around here. They're about 12 feet long. The large intestine is about 5 feet, the colon. So the pancreatic enzymes are secreted to work on the protein changes, the peptide chains so the amino acids have been denatured. They've been broken down a little bit, and then there's more to digest them. Remember, proteins are really hard to break down. Then if you think about this, if you ever had a really well-done piece of steak, that's like leather. That's what your body has to break down with chemical and mechanical processes. And proteins are critical because protein is the primary. If you had to have one thing only, it should be protein. Because your body can convert protein and store it as glycogen in the liver for carbohydrates, for fuel. But it can't take carbohydrates and resynthesize amino acids. It's impossible. So that's why people could live on meat, but they couldn't live on fruit, other than the few people that are fruitarians that are able to recycle or theoretically able to recycle their amino acids. But there are people who live entirely on meat or entirely on, if they had to, they've eaten each other's bodies and, there's plane crashes and stuff, but they didn't eat, sprouts. So protein digestion is critical because your body is basically a protein synthesizing organism. You're made out of protein. All your cells, your bones, everything is protein. You've got to get the proteins in the right order, break them down, and then resynthesize complete proteins. The liver does that. We'll talk about that in the liver class, if you guys attend that.
It doesn't have to be meat.
Well,
You get protein.
theoretically, so the bottom line for that is it's all based on one's experience entirely. If you can take the vegetation and synthesize complete proteins and function optimally, that's true. Some people can, other people can't. So theoretically you can say, and what happens is the reason that's the case is that your body is also genetically programmed based on the genetics that you inherited from your ancestors. And for a lot of people, they did not have the enzyme systems to resynthesize certain proteins from vegetation because their ancestors never ate exclusively vegetation. Some people can mutate their enzymes and do that. Other people can't. I've known quite a few people that couldn't do it, but some people can. So that is true. There are amino acids in all foods, just about. But the full spectrum is found in a variety of foods. The safest approach for my observation in my clinical practice is to go in the middle and to make deviations to one side or the other just gradually to assess changes in your body, how you feel. But when I was younger, I did extreme this, extreme that. And I learned through trial and error to go more in the middle and then make slight changes one way or the other, and then things are more stable. Any questions so far?
How long was the small intestine?
About 12 feet. So the middle part of the small intestine is called the jejunum, and that's where most nutrient absorption takes place. So in the jejunum, there's little finger-like projections called microvilli. That's through those little hairs is where the nutrients are taken up into. So the amino acids, the glucose, the fatty acids, a lot of fat digestion takes place there too. And if those microvilli are damaged by pathogens like yeast or parasites or too much acid, remember your stomach should be acid, but your intestine should be alkaline. Without an alkaline intestinal tract, what grows? Yeast, fungus, parasites. So the pH of the stomach has to be acid, of course. The pH of the intestines has to be more alkaline. 7 is neutral. Okay? So if you have candida or parasites growing throughout your intestinal tract, which a lot of people have, pretty much most people have to some degree, you're going to have some of that 12 feet of intestinal tract damaged, that surface area damaged, and nutrient absorption will be reduced. Remember, it's not what you eat that counts, it's what you digest and assimilate. You could eat, I've known people ate perfect diets, absolutely impeccable, but they didn't have nutrient uptake. They didn't absorb the food. So it was worthless. Some people, they eat reasonably bad, and they have fantastic nutrient uptake. Their stomachs are just powerful, and they can eat so-so. You've met people like this, right? They eat horribly, but they feel great, and they look great, and they actually age pretty well. It's just genetics there, right? They can somehow, everything's connected. So let's say that person's immune system was super powerful and could just knock out pathogens and clear out toxins, and their liver is twice the strength of yours or mine. So they just have a big advantage. They were born with a big bank account, and they could blow it and still have more than a person who doesn't. So some people have that, but that's not, most people come to see me, they would never come to see me if they felt good. So I've actually had very little contact with them. Usually I've heard about them. Or they've stumbled in, a wife will drag their husband into the office and insist that he gets the blood tested because he eats so bad and his blood looks better than hers, and then she's, and he says, "I told you so, honey," and but that's the way it goes, So this microvilli, the health of those microvilli is important, and part of what determines their health is whether they're being damaged. So what is it that regulates or suppresses the overgrowth of these pathogens? Bacteria. You have 100 trillion microorganisms in your intestinal tract. That's more than the number of cells you have in your body. About 10 trillion cells. 100 trillion bacteria in your intestinal tract. 500 or so strains. And some people say there's good bacteria and bad bacteria, but really, we don't really know what are all the benefits of bacteria. A lot of people are told E. coli is bad for you, right? An overgrowth of E. coli is bad for you. E. coli, if you don't have enough of it, can cause depression. There's doctors, actually medical doctors now, just regular medical doctors that are injecting E. coli into people for depression. And it's helping. Because so bacteria is all about balance. I'm not saying that we need to chug E. coli, gallons of E. coli. I'm saying that there's to some degree, there's an artificial distinction between good and bad bacteria. We know that some are good, like Acidophilus and Bifidus and Bulgaricus and, Plantarum, and there's a few that we've researched are really good. There's maybe, a few dozen. But there could be benefits to these other bacteria that we're not aware of yet. That's why every few years you hear of the new latest good bacteria strain, right? Well, because 10 years before they didn't know it. So obviously we're still growing our knowledge. So this is why some people say it's dangerous to eat raw food because of all the bacteria. Maybe not. I knew a guy that had intestinal cancer. His whole intestines were riddled with cancer. He ate raw food, all raw food, meat and everything, healed his intestinal cancer. I mean, I know the guy. So I've seen this over and over again. What we think is the truth could change within a few years, And so basically think about what has nature done. I mean, it's true. Certain animals, carnivores produce a lot more hydrochloric acid than we do, so they might be more suited for large amounts of fermented, rotting, flesh or something. But many humans eat that too. Eskimos ferment foods, their meats and everything. We ferment foods all the time. There's bacteria on it. The good bacteria, let's just call it for now, good bacteria and bad bacteria. The good bacteria are the #1 key to digestive health. If you look on that list that I gave of the top things that are for health, the top 10 digestive tips for digestive health, right next to conscious eating is beneficial flora, beneficial bacteria. And I've seen the most amazing changes in people's health just by adding a little bit of high-quality Acidophilus and Bifidus. From little kids, I had little kids who are basically, they can't digest a thing, they're crying, they have dark circles in their eyes, they're skinny. All of a sudden, they get good bacteria in them, fine. The mother says, oh, she's fine. 2 months or a month. She's fine. Oh, then she stopped doing it for a while, then gave her some more vaccinations or antibiotics, and now she's crying again. I wonder why. Well, it's all in the bacteria. And most of it it's going to live in your intestines, your small and large intestine. So that bacteria is critical to health. So there's foods that we can culture and have good quality bacteria, high quality, good bacteria. Yogurts, the dairy foods that are cultured, kefir and yogurt are two of the best. I had a friend of mine, or actually was a patient in a clinic, he became a friend later, who had the worst ulcerative colitis of anybody I've ever seen in my life. His bleeding ulcers out of his colon. He tried everything on the planet, raw food diet, vegan, probiotics. I mean, he used drugs up a long time ago. He tried everything. Nothing worked. Then he tried to make his own kefir. He made his own kefir, cured himself. Large amounts, though. That and raw eggs and vegetable juices. That did it for him. I remember I used to see this guy. He would come to the office. His skin was always full of acne. He was skinny. And we tried everything for him. And I finally said, just try the raw kefir. Just make it yourself. Forget buying kefir. Make it yourself. And I didn't see him for like 5 months, 6 months. And then I saw him at the health food store. I didn't recognize him. He's like, wow. This guy's skin was good. He looked like he was just completely rejuvenated. He said, I took your advice. I made the raw kefir. And it's a cultured milk, cultured dairy. So the good bacteria is absolutely critical. So that comes in at the at the small intestine, because that's where most of your digestion takes place. And the good bacteria, it breaks down food. So you still have food that maybe was not perfectly digested in the first 2 stages, right? The stomach and duodenum, you did your best you could, but nothing was perfect. So you got all this gunk floating down into your gut with parasites and everything in there, trying to feed on it. So what comes to the rescue? The good bacteria, right? What does it do? It digests your food and it kills and suppresses bad bacteria or parasites, right? So that's why it's the ultimate, it's like your salvation in a way. The good bacteria is your immune system and it's your digestion. And that's why every society that has an ounce of sense, other than like our society, has a food that they've focused on that's a cultured food that generates that good bacteria.
Is kombucha, do you consider kombucha cultured?
Yeah, yeah. And that could be, and now the thing is that when you culture your own food, so it's an art to it. Some people don't do it right and they throw the bacteria out of balance and people have problems. I've known people that got poisoned from kombucha, you know.
Are you too much, you mean?
They put kombucha, they cultured it in something that had lead in it or something, you know, or whatever. You know, they had some problem, aluminum. They got poisoned from the kombucha. I knew people have done it. Or I've made all this stuff too. And sometimes it turns out good, other times not too good. So what I've done, so cultured foods are an art. It's not just anybody can, you have to pay attention to how to do it and do it right and see how it feels in your body. Ultimately what matters is how does your body feel, right? If your body feels great with it, it's working. If it feels really off, probably didn't make the right batch. Something was a little off. And it could be your particular digestive tract needs a different combo of bacteria. See, that's the other frustrating thing for a lot of people. They say, I've tried probiotics, they don't work. They try another one, and it works. It's just, it's like you pretty much have to try, I mean, you could do muscle testing, you could do whatever, but in the world of probiotics, there's certain criteria. I've come down to, there's a couple on my resource guide that I endorse because they are more likely to work than anything else. And they're on the resource guide, but you can see there's two different philosophies entirely. One is Natron is a company that specializes in probiotics. That's all they do is make probiotics. They do Acidophilus, Bifidus, and Bulgaricus, the three most highly researched strains, and the most highly researched strains of those particular strains, types of bacteria. And they have it freeze-dried and in an oil gel matrix, and they plop it down through your stomach to protect it with the oil gel matrix, and it does really well. I'd used that exclusively for years, and it works very well. And there's another one. Now I've seen some people don't do well with it, and there's some soil-based organisms that I've seen that work incredibly well for some people. Those ones from Garden of Life, you know, about that company. There's a bacteria that actually grow in the soil that have been studied, found that certain strains are really good. That works for some people very well. And the other one that I'm just starting to use now at the suggestion of a client of mine who had the worst digestive system, and she cured it with a particular product. You know, I thought, well, this has got to be pretty good, you know, is from Canada, and it's just 17 different cultured foods in a paste called LB17, live bacteria 17. But there could be other ones out there. That's just my limited, you know, this is a whole universe, probiotics, if you want to study it. But those are my current endorsements. So we have the most nutrients absorbed in the jejunum. What I didn't talk about is the liver. Where does the liver come in? The liver is going to secrete bile to help emulsify and make soluble or absorbable or put in solution little aggregates, the fats, because fat doesn't mix with water well, so you have to have some way to solubilize it. So the bile is secreted, it's stored in the gallbladder, GB, gallbladder, liver, gallbladder shoots it down into the duodenum and starts to work on the fats there too. And then there's some further fat digestion that takes place in the intestines. And actually, remember, fat digestion started in the mouth. The stomach has some lipase too that comes in, and the duodenum, and the intestines. So think about that. 4 different stages, because fats are also hard to digest. If you don't digest fats, guess what? Problems, because your cell membranes are all made out of fat. Your hormones are all made out of fat. Poor fat digestion is one reason why people have hormone imbalances. It's not a lack of some synthetic hormone, it's they don't digest or have the proper fats. So you start to work on digestion with chewing, if you need to take enzymes to support your digestion system for a while, or herbs, you do that. Get the good bacteria in, so you cover all these stages from mouth to stomach to duodenum to intestines, support the pancreas, get more raw foods in there, get more probiotics in there, and I'll be amazed if your digestion doesn't improve. Like I said, just these 10 things I mentioned here, these 10 things are the best I can come up with on digestion. So the gallbladder secretes dumps the bile into the duodenum. Starches are completed digestion in the duodenum then too, broken down into glucose molecules and absorbed through, all this absorption takes place in the intestines through the portal venous, the hepatic venous portal system. So there's all the stuff, all the nutrients have to be funneled into the liver first, right? Because you've got to separate nutrients from poisons. You can't just like absorb this stuff right into your bloodstream. That would be the dumbest thing in the world. You eat stuff that's, most of it's full of poisons. Everything is processed through your liver. The liver is the command center of, it determines whether you'll live or die, totally. If your liver is in bad shape, you're dead. Because you can't get rid of toxins. And what is pretty much all disease is toxicity. So all this stuff, these nutrients, nutrients in the intestines are being absorbed through these microvilli, all channeling back into the liver. The liver is going to say, nutrient here, toxin here, get rid of the toxins through another process, which we'll go through some other time. And then gets it into circulation, right? Into your bloodstream. That's where you see if your digestion was really working. If you didn't get the perfect digestion, if you have leaky gut, like your intestines have little holes in them and poisons are leaking in your bloodstream will be undigested food. In a live blood cell, you can see that, at least signs of it. So you have undigested food, also waste that's in your gut, instead of passing out, gets into the bloodstream. For those who have seen me, have anybody ever seen leaky gut, what it looks like in a dark field microscope? We have, some of us have. That's not pleasant. Waste that should go out in your bowels, in your bloodstream, now your liver and immune system have to do more work, as if it's not working hard enough already with all the chemicals and poisons. Let's be nice to our bodies. So I'll go over those conditions too, like why do we get leaky gut? And what can we do about it? We could get surgery, right, and get a new intestinal tract, or we could just fix it, with our body is a chemical factory. You can just change your chemistry and repair things. People seem, a lot of people, they don't realize, like if, your hair grows and you cut it and it grows back, right? You cut your finger and you don't just die from bleeding to death. You actually, it heals. The same thing happens with your liver and your intestines and your brain cells, as if you can't regenerate brain cells. Give me a break. Or your intestinal cells are constantly being regenerated, constantly. So all you got to do is the game is things are breaking down and you're building them up. So you build them up faster than they're breaking down, then you're ahead. You're spending money and you're making money. You spend money faster, you make money, then you're negative. You make money faster, you spend money, then you're ahead. So it's the same game. It is an endless game of rebuilding and breaking down. So once you get that, you know that the key to rebuilding is pretty much enzymes and good bacteria, and eat consciously. Then you can see why raw food works, because raw food has lots of enzymes in it. Enzymes are those molecules that hydrolyze or cut the big molecules into little molecules. So enzymes equal life. That's why in my resource guide, I put down 2 of the books are Enzymes, The Key to Health, Volume 1, Fundamentals by Howard Loomis, Food Enzymes for Health and Longevity, Edward Howell. You can't, if you study enzymes and you study probiotics, you could open a clinic for every health problem in the world, and if you're better at marketing than I am, you'll make a fortune. It's really not that hard. That's where the problems lie. That's it. That's why these raw food people get good results, generally, because they're onto a basic fundamental principle, is that the game is breaking down big things into little things. That's the whole game right there. That's what digestion is. And assuming you have the nutrients in the big things to begin with, which all you got to do is eat the best you can and then cover the deficiencies with common sense supplements, and you should be way ahead of the game. Okay, so now the bottom of the intestines, the last part of the intestines is called the ileum, and that's where there's a little bit of digestion takes place. Vitamin B12 is absorbed in the ileum with a specific type of protein called intrinsic factor, which if you're not synthesizing that, you may have trouble getting B12, which will lead to anemia. Okay, so that's the small intestine right there. So then you have the ileocecal valve that dumps into the colon, and that's where the waste moves out, right? 90% of digestion has taken place in the intestines, but it's taken 2 to 6 hours. Now, the rest of the stuff, it stays in, the fibers and other waste in the colon for 6 to 72 hours long. So why is that? That slow transit time for most people is because they have too much junk to process. Their colons are clogged. They're not moving fast. That's why colon cleansing, once you move out some of this waste and get these, there's all kinds of problems in the colon that take place. Once you get that cleared up a bit, transit time will increase. And they'll have less time where that waste is fermenting and rotting in your colon. Now, there's some good things that take place in the colon, too. You have a lot of beneficial bacteria that ferments the fibers in the food, which then create nutrients to help repair and heal the colon. So actually, good bacteria, again, to the rescue. The good bacteria in the colon is helping break down all that fiber and synthesize nutrients that help repair the colon from all the damage it takes from all the waste that's moving through. And parasites can live in the colon, too. And it's mainly in the intestines. So that's the large intestines. Okay, so I think that 8 o'clock, is that our break time? You have to read. So now we're going to have a little dancing for everybody. So now let's go over, I want to now go over, so we've gone over, are there any questions about digestion? Because it's more complicated than this, but does this help at all? I mean, honestly?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
On a kefir, can you digest that if you're allergic to milk?
It depends. I mean, if what you're allergic. Oh, if kefir, can you digest kefir if you're allergic to milk? Most people have milk allergies are lactose intolerant. And casein? Yeah. You might not, because there's going to be, it depends on if the protein is broken down by the bacteria. You'd have to, the only way to know is to test it. I was allergic to milk my whole life. Drank raw milk, no problem. But some people can't digest raw milk, even. Or it has to be goat milk, or it has to be cultured milk, or so it depends on the person. The thing I would say is experiment with these things, because if somebody tells you, yeah, you have to do this or that, that's just theoretical. They really don't know. If you do it and you feel good, then there's your answer. It doesn't.
I haven't tried it, but I have been told that you can use the kefir granules with nut milks.
Yeah.
And culture the nut milk and still get the benefit.
You could. You can culture exactly. You can culture, you can sprout nuts and seeds, so you have the enzymes activated there. So anything that facilitates enzyme action is going to be good. So that's the way people heal. These people, imagine ulcerative colitis, the guy bleeding ulcers in his colon, and he cured himself basically with kefir and a bunch of raw protein, fats and proteins. That was it.
And soy milk can be used too.
If you can digest it, but some people can't digest it. I would not. Fermented soy is better. You can get powdered fermented soy and just rehydrate it. That's better. So soy has a trypsin inhibitor in it, which blocks a trypsin enzyme. So a lot of people don't digest the soy protein, but they digest fermented or sprouted soy. So like the Orientals, they don't drink soy milk like that. They have miso soup, or they have tempeh. They have, or their bodies have adapted to it. But a lot of people I know that I've come across, they don't digest soy. But if it's fermented or sprouted, they digest it fine, better.
Fermented or sprouted soy?
Yeah.
You mean the beans?
Yeah, and the fermented, then they powder it, and there's products now. There's markets for this stuff all the time. Health product companies make sprouted, fermented soy foods. And that's the bet. Or find out for yourself and eat it, and if you feel good with it, then do it. There's your answer. Ultimately, you have, now the way when I look at people's blood, I look at their blood and I see if there's undigested protein in their blood. And if they're drinking soy milk every day and they have lots of undigested protein and other sources that's the primary source of protein, then that's because they don't digest it. And when they cut it out and there's less of it, then that's a sign that it was the soy protein or soy milk that was causing it. Otherwise, when they stopped doing it, they would still look the same.
And what's the best way to get proteins if you don't eat meat or dairy?
It depends. Some people can digest beans. Some people could, spirulina has protein in it. Nuts and seeds have protein. Every food has protein in it. You could drink a large amount of leafy vegetables. But what I would say is you've got to look at the whole picture. So, I endorse finding the diet that's right for your specific metabolism, not following a theory about it, whether you should be a blood type O, you should eat meat, or you should be a vegan because humans aren't supposed to eat meat. That's theoretical. I would say find out what works for you in your experience. There's your answer. And don't go with theories, go with reality, what's actually happening for you. So everything is balanced. I mean, the bacteria levels are balanced, the minerals are balanced, the enzymes, the hydrochloric acid and pancreatic bicarbonate enzymes are balanced. Everything, the Orientals were right about balance. Balance is the key to health. You know, the parasympathetic, sympathetic, autonomic nervous system is balanced, right? So let's talk about that now. So how do emotions affect digestion? Do you all know about the autonomic nervous system? It's the part of the nervous system that acts automatically without your conscious thought. Like breathing. You don't have to think, breathe, inhale, exhale, otherwise you'll stop breathing. You automatically breathe. As your heart rate automatically, your heart pumps. As your digestion automatically works, right? You don't have to think about it, it does it automatically. And there's two branches to the autonomic nervous system. The sympathetic, which is the fight or flight branch of it, and the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest. Isn't that fancy? So you can see which one is better for eating, to be in parasympathetic mode, which makes sense. If you're running from a tiger, it's not a good time to eat, right? Because your energy is going to your legs and your senses, like, where's the next tiger, you know? So when you're resting, you're looking at some nice waterfall, that's a good time to eat, because you're in rest and relax mode. Then your energy is channeled to your pancreas and your liver and your intestines, right? Because your energy is like, it's like you have an energy supply, you can channel it, you know. Run, fight, or digest, not both. I mean, it's simple. So really, that really, in a nutshell, digestion, as far as emotions go, is when you're aggravated, angry, afraid, worried, all those, you know, quote-unquote negative emotions, it's not a good time to eat. I mean, if you eat anyway, I would take a lot of enzymes. I've eaten when I'm not in a calm mood, but I just take a lot of enzymes to make up, to compensate for the lack of my, you know, you can compensate for your poor conscious eating habits. But ideally, you would be relaxed in a parasympathetic resting mode and eat without worrying about anything. Just, you'd actually focus on the food. First of all, thank, you know, that you have the food, number one, because you could just as easily be in Gaza now and have nothing to eat, or very little, or in some other part of the world where they don't have much food. But you got food, organic food probably. You probably got a selection of foods, not just like 2 or 3 things. And we're pretty lucky. So the first step is gratitude for food. And you know, there's all religions have prayers. I was raised with a Sanskrit prayer that acknowledged that God is in the food, in the person who harvests the food, in the flame that cooks the food, and in your mother that cooked the food, and in you that's eating the food.
Can you share that with us?
No, that we'll do it later.
Email us.
Oh yeah, the prayer.
What do you think of Ayurvedic cooking?
It could be good. It's certainly designed for Indians. I mean, that was their. So all the here's the thing with food.